Night in New York. The city still believes it's untouchable, glowing like a giant circuit board. Millions of windows, millions of lives, everything running smoothly, until someone reaches for the power plug of the entire East Coast. In a windowless room, secure channels scream for attention. On the screens, the national power grid sprawls like a glowing web. Inside that storm of data, a new string appears: Phantom Key. Nobody knows what it is. They only know that from that moment on, the clock has started ticking. 12:03 a.m. The lights of New York go out in a single swallowing blink. Street by street, tower by tower, everything collapses into darkness. Far away in Washington, the Pentagon drowns in the same black as every backup system dies. On the emergency frequency, a distorted voice cuts through. The blackout is just the overture. Start counting. In the middle of all that dying light, a man is trapped between four sheets of steel. Kane Rourke, a former operative, the system already buried on paper. He feels the elevator shudder, hears the cables groan somewhere above his head, and the steady thump of his own heartbeat in the dark. At last, the elevator doors are pried open by a technician's trembling hands. A flashlight stabs into Kane's face, but he doesn't flinch. He crawls out, rises into a corridor lit only by pulsing red emergency lights. People panic. Kane doesn't. This isn't the first time he stood in a city that just had its plug ripped out. One satellite channel is still alive. The voice of an Aegis Division operator crackles in Kane's earpiece, urgent but trying to stay calm. They need him to be their eyes on the ground in New York while Washington falls apart. But they didn't call just for his skills. They called because his past is already stained by another blackout, one that ended in blood. Kane pushes through the lobby, through the shouting, through the swarm of screens lighting up like fireflies. Out on the street, there are horns, breaking glass, children crying. Somewhere, a transformer has just exploded, its fire slashing the sky. In the dark, New York isn't a tourist city anymore. It's a battlefield, and Kane is back on the front line, whether he wanted to come back or not. He slips into a side alley to escape the crowd and stops. On a damp brick wall, painted in dripping spray, is a mask with no eyes and a single word beneath it: Phantom. His phone vibrates. An old audio file plays by itself, a girl's fading voice under the hiss of hospital machines. "You promised the lights would come back, Kane." Then the distorted voice from a moment ago returns, whispering in his ear, "We meet again, Rourke. This time, don't let the whole city die like last time."
You're listening to Midnight Action Stories, thrilling crime tales after dark. If you enjoy these late-night missions, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop your questions or theories in the comments below.
In Washington, the air is thick with cold coffee and fear. In the emergency briefing room, the map of the East Coast lights up and then goes dark, one region at a time, cities turning into black squares. No one dares call this a technical issue anymore. This is an attack, crawling up the spine of America. The smart grid, once praised as the future, has become a knife turned inward. With just a few lines of code, power plants shut down as if someone flipped a switch. At the center of all that traffic, where every signal gets routed and redirected, sits a massive hydroelectric dam. Whoever controls that heart can squeeze the entire East Coast in their fist. One name cuts through the noise: Dr. Lena Hart, energy security specialist at the Department of Energy. She understands this system better than anyone because she helped design part of its safety protocols. And that means her past is tied to Kane's past, knotted together in a blackout neither of them ever wants to talk about. While New York drowns in darkness, Lena's voice comes through Kane's secure earpiece.
She explains that the digital fingerprints in this strange blackout are a perfect match, bit for bit, with an incident 5 years ago, and hospital power loss that killed dozens. The incident the official report called a technical failure, and Kane calls a nightmare that never ended. Lena doesn't sugarcoat it. The control sequence driving tonight's blackout carries the same old name, Phantom Blackout, the thing they both thought was buried with the hospital files. Now it's back, bigger, sharper, and this time it isn't aimed at one building. It's aimed at half a country and at everything Kane has been trying to forget. An emergency response SUV pushes Kane and Lena through the chaos of New York. Sirens wail, but without traffic lights, no one knows which way to move. Lena sketches out the nightmare. If someone is using Phantom Blackout to bring down the grid, this is only the opening move. Next, they can go after defense systems, traffic control, hospitals, turning every smart city into a dumb, bleeding battlefield. They reach the regional power control center. Instead of rows of bright screens, they find a dying room. A few monitors running on backup batteries, pale engineers who haven't slept in hours. One of them shoves a stack of printed logs into Lena's hands, the last thing they pulled before the system flatlined. On paper, every trace points to the same place, a proxy IP outside the United States, a direction that's a little too convenient for anyone desperate to find someone to blame. In the corner, a security camera feed plays back on a flickering monitor. The footage is grainy, distorted, but just clear enough to show a man in a ball cap and mask entering the technical wing a few hours before the blackout. An engineer recognizes the walk, Ethan Crow, an IT specialist fired for selling system data off the books. The moment his name hits the screen, Washington grabs it like a lifeline, the sacrificial lamb they've been waiting for. Within hours, the media swallows the story whole. A traitor selling his soul to a foreign power, an external strike against the American homeland. On the small screen in Kane's hand, a politician stands at a podium, voice full of fury and certainty, proud to announce they've found the answer. But something in Kane bristles. It's all too neat, too clean. Real conspiracies are rarely this easy to understand. Kane's encrypted device buzzes again, not with an official update, but with a single hidden line of text surfacing from deep inside the system logs. Crow is just a shadow. You're looking the wrong way, just like last time. Kane looks up and sees at the far end of the alley that eyeless mask on the wall, watching him back. In the blackout swallowing the East Coast, someone still sees every step Kane Rourke takes.
Following Crow's trail, Kane and Lena are led to a stretch of the Hudson riverfront where rows of containers sit like metal tombs. In the middle of the empty lot stands a lone warehouse, its rolling door half closed, no guards, no obvious cameras. It looks like the perfect place to hide, or the perfect place to spring a trap. Inside, there's no sign of a hasty escape. Instead, everything is laid out like a flawless confession. Power grid maps, fake passports, stacks of cash, a laptop still on, showing logins from foreign IPs. Ethan Crow, the traitor selling out his country, seems to have left every incriminating detail on the only table in the room. The scene is so spotless that Kane can't help feeling filthy. Standing in the middle of this ready-made guilt, Kane's instincts tell him this isn't a victory in the investigation, it's a stage. Before he can say it out loud to Lena, heavy footsteps drum across the concrete and red laser dots sweep across the wall. The warehouse door explodes inward, a fully armed team storms in, silent, no one shouting freeze. They're not here to arrest, they're here to erase. Gunfire rips through the air, muzzle flashes tearing the darkness apart. Lena flattens herself behind a crate, fingers scrambling to yank cables free from the laptop, while Kane slides behind a row of shelves, firing back in short, surgical bursts.
In his earpiece, a voice, cold, official, but unfamiliar, gives the order. Target Rourke is priority. Ensure no witnesses. For the first time tonight, Kane understands he isn't just hunting Phantom. He's the one on the chopping block. There's no time left to argue with fate, only to run from it. Kane spots a maintenance hatch in the corner, drags Lena toward it through a rain of bullets. They drop into the storm drain, filthy water smashing into their faces just as the world above them convulses. The explosion tears the night open, fire swallowing the warehouse, devouring everything that might have proved Ethan Crowe innocent or guilty. By the time they crawl out of a manhole a few blocks away, all that's left behind them is a dark column of smoke rising from a crime scene that's just been wiped clean. In a narrow alley that's quiet for now, soaked and gasping, they finally stop. In his palm, Kane shows Lena the one thing he managed to rip from the laptop in the chaos, a small hard drive, wet with sewer water, but intact. They slump down against the wall, breathing smoke and adrenaline. Lena plugs the drive into a rugged encryption tablet. The screen flickers, then shows a single file, nameless, time-stamped at the exact second the blackout began. Kane taps it like he's touching an old trap he once walked straight into. The file doesn't hold source code or schematics. It holds a photograph. A hospital, an ICU, drained of light, life support machines dead and still, like fish floating belly up. In the glass, the reflection of a younger man stands helpless on the other side. Kane recognizes himself from the day everything collapsed. Beneath the picture, one line of text. Every blackout needs a scapegoat. This time, it's you. And below that, the opening characters of Phantom Blackout. Their trace not leading out of the country, but pointing straight back to Washington. The technical traces dance across the screen like living ink, but the conclusion is brutally simple. The first command in the Phantom Blackout sequence didn't originate from some foreign IP. It was bounced through dozens of nodes and came from somewhere very familiar, a secure subnet in Washington, reserved for national security agencies. Lena's hand tightens, her voice shaking with anger as she says what they're both thinking. Someone on our side opened the door and invited Phantom into the grid. Kane stares into the black of the screen and understands that this time the ghost isn't hiding at the border. It's sitting inside the house.
Aegis draws a cold, straight line on the map, from Washington to the dam. The heart Phantom is crushing in its fist. An old helicopter is pulled out of retirement to ferry Kane and Lena through the night. Below them, the east coast is a single strip of darkness, broken only by a few lonely islands of generator light. No one speaks in the cabin. There's only the rotors and an invisible countdown pounding against their ribs. On the emergency radio, the anchor's voice trembles as she reads off the list of hospitals running out of fuel, the small riots flaring up in the dark. Every name she says is a drill bit boring into Kane's memory of that hospital years ago. Lena studies the thermal map of the dam, spillway gates cycling out of sequence, water temperature rising, every warning indicator flipping red. Someone out there doesn't just want to kill the power, they want to turn the dam into a bomb made of water hanging over tens of thousands of lives. The alarms on the instrument panel haven't even finished screaming when the next threat arrives. An armed drone peels itself out of the night, navigation lights blinking, gun under its belly spitting fire. The helicopter judders, the pilot swears into the chaos. Kane wrenches the side door open, clings to the frame, and fires back in short, vicious bursts at the shadow closing in. They bring the drone down, but the cost is a cooked flight system. The pilot yells, "Brace for impact!" The helicopter plunges into a stand of trees near the dam, disintegrating in a rain of leaves and metal. As fire from the wreck licks up through the canopy, Kane drags Lena out of the twisted frame, both of them staggering through the forest night. At the edge of the trees, a small farmhouse sits in total darkness, its windows blind, its yard empty except for an old pickup truck by the barn. They leave an Aegis ID card on the steps, like a promise to come back and explain someday, then gun the truck onto an unlit mountain road.
Gravel screams under the tires, sharp turns stack one after another, and ahead, the dam rises like a glowing concrete monolith in the sea of black. The dashboard clock ticks down the minutes, counting in sync with a new sound that crackles to life over the dam's emergency loudspeakers. A voice, mangled and metallic, like Phantom itself talking to the valley. 15 minutes to permanent lights out, it rasps. Below the concrete wall, the spillway churns like boiling water, red warning lights strobing across its slick surface. Lena looks at Kane and says only one line. Either we shut it down, or it wipes the map. The main entrances are locked and guarded, but Lena knows every structure has arteries people forget to watch, the maintenance tunnels. They abandon the truck a distance away and slip into a side door in the dam's flank, using a forged badge and a few lines of code only the system's architect would remember. The door screeches open onto a narrow, wet corridor, pipes and cables running like the guts of a giant animal. The roar of water from the dam's core pulses through the walls, woven together with the distant, ever-present countdown. The tunnel spills them into the control room, the place that should be blazing with screens and techs. Now only one light remains, the eyeless mask logo on the main display, pulsing like it's breathing. In front of the huge window that looks down on the raging spillway stands a lone figure with his back turned. When he pivots, both Kane and Lena recognize him. Miles Danner, senior official at the Department of Energy, the man who led the investigation into the hospital incident and signed off on calling it a malfunction. Danner doesn't run, doesn't act surprised. He greets Kane like an old colleague, then calmly lays it out. Phantom isn't a single hacker, it's a protocol, a crisis management project he and others have been feeding for years. The blackouts, the accidents, all of them were tests to measure how a society responds. Tonight is the real exam. He points to the control console. One branch of commands will reset the grid immediately, saving the dam, but killing power to thousands of patients on life support for a few minutes, long enough for many to die. The other branch keeps the hospitals lit, but lets Phantom trigger Phase 2, structural failure, a wall of water roaring downstream. Danner smiles. This time, you choose, Rourke. Who do you kill to save whom? Outside, the water climbs in time with the countdown, and for the first time tonight, Kane isn't just asked to hit his target, he's asked to shoot straight through his own conscience.
Kane stares at the two lethal branches on the console, jaw clenched. For a few seconds, it looks like he's accepting Danner's rules. He lowers his gun, steps up to the controls, his fingertip hovering above the confirmation key. Danner smiles thinly, convinced he's finally cornered the last piece on the board. But instead of pressing down, Kane pivots, throwing his entire weight into Danner, slamming him away from the controls, and in the same motion, hitting the key that hands auxiliary access over to the secondary station, where Lena has been waiting. Lena doesn't pick a side in Danner's rigged coin toss. She rewrites the coin. Lines of code pour out under her fingers, carving the reset into slices, region by region, cluster by cluster, like shutting down and restarting the limbs of a dying body one at a time. On her screen, the East Coast map flickers back to life in small patches that slowly knit together. In a hospital somewhere, lights stutter, monitors scream, then settle as oxygen keeps flowing and a patient drags in one more breath. Outside the window, the flow through the spillway starts to ease, the red numbers on the gauges ticking back towards safe. Phantom wanted one massive shock to the system. Lena and Kane turn it into 1,000 small hits the body can still survive. Danner realizes he's lost control before the system has time to say it out loud. He lunges up, grabs a backup gun, and bolts for the emergency exit, out onto the narrow catwalk clinging to the dam's wall. Kane catches him there, the two men grappling on slick steel, mist boiling up around them, a white roar of water waiting below. Danner's arguments, threats, justifications bleed into the thunder of the spillway. His hand slips on the cold rail, his eyes lock on Kane's, as if he's about to say one last thing,
and then his body drops over the edge, vanishing into the churning foam. Rescue teams will search for days. They will never pull up a corpse. Hours later, as the lights crawl back along New York's avenues, people cheer under the street lamps like they've escaped the end of the world. On a barroom TV, a spokesperson smiles into the camera. The lone insider, Miles Danner, has been neutralized. Our national security framework remains strong. The story is wrapped up tight and tidy, like it always is. On a rooftop above the newly relit city, Kane stands alone in the wind. The encrypted device in his hand buzzes. A new message, unsigned, appears. Test complete. National response, predictable. Phase 2, pending. Next to the text, the eyeless mask icon, tiny, sharper than any skyline beneath his feet. Kane exhales, not from exhaustion, but from understanding that tonight they only broke one wave. The real tide is still waiting offshore.
You're listening to Midnight Action Stories, thrilling crime tales after dark. If you enjoy these late-night missions, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop your questions or theories in the comments below.